Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Computer gaming has a long and storied history going back well before IBM itself launched the PC in 1981. Most people today who want to play games on their PC have a dedicated graphics card to render the amazing 3D images that we all take for granted today. Most, but not all. Some people play games on integrated graphics built into the CPU or even their motherboard if we're going back a few years. And for some games, this works better than you might think. This is Battlefield 5 at 1080p low detail in multiplayer Conquest. It's not running at 60 frames per second, but it's not that far off, and most importantly, it's running smoothly. You can thank the 8 Zen 3 cores on the CPU for that last part. More on that in a minute. This PC does not have a graphics card. It is running on the Vega 8 graphics built right into the 5700G CPU, and I was able to play a full battle. It was totally controllable, and the input lag was manageable. This isn't suitable for super competitive gamers, but for casual fans who just want to blast things, it works perfectly fine. I start off showing you that because it's all too easy to dismiss integrated graphics as useless for real gaming, whatever that is supposed to mean. Of course, a dedicated graphics card is going to provide far superior graphical detail and performance, but not everyone has the luxury of using one. Today, I've got 35 games to show you across all levels of playability, graphic settings, and even RAM speed settings. We have new AAA games, old AAA games, free-to-play games from multiple eras, classic games, and more. This video is meant to be a definitive guide of the Ryzen 7 5700G's gaming performance. Good, bad, and everything in between. Now, this will be a long video, so please sit back, relax, grab a drink, grab a snack, and let's get into it.
Today's video is brought to you by URCD Keys, the best source for Windows 10 and Office Professional product keys at deeply discounted prices, and we have got further discounts on those at the end of this video.
First, there will be timestamps in the video description below as well as in the YouTube timeline itself. You can absolutely skip around if you're looking for something specific. However, please consider watching the whole thing once straight through. It's designed to tell a story, and there is more to performance than benchmark charts. Also, if you like our content, watch time percentage is important to the YouTube algorithm, so watching the entire video is a great free way to support us and promote the video to others. Another great way to support us and to see the benchmark charts and filming scripts early is Patreon. Link in the video description below. For just $2 per month or a flat $20 for an entire year, you get early access to the charts and the written version of the script used for filming. I showed you Battlefield 5 at the start of the video. Let's look at another game that is super playable, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. This is also 1080p low detail, just like Battlefield 5 was. However, we now have an average frame rate of 80 frames per second and a 1% low near 60 frames per second. This is solid performance, and it still looks decent at low detail. You could crank this up to medium if you're okay to trade some performance for visual detail. To be fair, Infinite Warfare came out in 2016, so that helps a lot when it comes to performance. Battlefield 5 came out in 2018, which is the primary reason why it runs slower. Switching back to Battlefield 5, one key point I want you to notice is the CPU usage. It ranges from 30% to 50%, which is anywhere from 5 to 8 of the cores on the 5700G. Anything over 50% is into hyperthreading, so the game runs smoothly, not because of the iGPU, but because of the CPU. If we slide Infinite Warfare onto the right side of the screen, you can easily compare the CPU usage between these two games. 2016 games only used 2 to 4 cores, while 2018 and beyond games really did start to use more than 4. Keep in mind that if the cores aren't needed, you can get almost the same performance here out of a Ryzen 7 5600G, which has the same basic design with 3 key changes. The 5600G has 6 cores versus the 8 cores on the 5700G. It has 200 MHz lower boost frequency, and it has Vega 7 graphics instead of Vega 8 graphics, which simply means it runs games 14% slower, all else being equal. I haven't done a review of the 5600G, and honestly, I'm not going to. Not because it's terrible, but because one of the key advantages of these CPUs is the ability to buy now, use the integrated graphics, and then add a dedicated graphics card later when the budget allows. 6-core CPUs first launched more than a decade ago in the consumer space, from Intel in the form of the i7-980X and AMD in the form of the Phenom 2X6. They entered the mainstream starting with the i7-5820K in 2014 and a huge way with the Ryzen 5 1600 in 2017. I am firmly of the opinion that for gaming PCs, 6-core chips are at the end of their era. 8 cores minimum is where you want to be for a brand new build. And if we're being honest, that's the entry level. For a premium build, 16 cores are where it's at going into 2023. Now, I know some of you will disagree with me here, and that is absolutely fine. It's your money, spend it however you like. I will just say this. I've been working in the computer field for 31 years. I started my first computer company 26 years ago. I've seen a lot of changes and trends over that time. I'm giving you my experienced and professional opinion based upon that background. Do with it what you will. Before we jump to a lot of benchmarks, including more live gameplay than typical for a video like this, let me run down the details and features of the Ryzen 7 5700G. If you know this stuff already, you can skip to the XCOM 2 benchmark in the timestamp below. The Ryzen 7 5700G launched in April of 2021 for OEMs and August of 2021 in a retail box for consumers at an MSRP of $359. It can be purchased for about $250 in the summer of 2022. It contains 8 Zen 3 cores that are hyper-threaded, giving us a total of 16 threads to work with and a max turbo frequency out of the box of 4.6 GHz. The CPU is unlocked, so if you have solid cooling, you can improve this. However, there really aren't a lot of gains to be had here. 4.8 GHz is typically the most you'll get, and that's with more effort than is worthwhile. So run it at stock. The CPU has 24 PCI Express lanes with 16 going to the first GPU slot, which we're not using here because we're using integrated graphics, but future upgradability. 4 going to the first M.2 slot on your AM4 board for an NVMe drive, and 4 is going directly to the chipset. Now this is important. These are Gen 3 lanes, one step down from the Gen 4 lanes of non-G Ryzen 5000 series CPUs. So a Ryzen 7 5700X has effectively the same cores at the same speed with the same number of PCI Express lanes. However, those are Gen 4 lanes on the X chip, but it lacks integrated graphics, which is what the G chip offers. To be blunt, if you cared, you'd be buying a Ryzen 9, so don't worry too much about the PCI Express lanes. This is for a budget build. You're not putting an RTX 3090 in here, or you shouldn't be. The built-in graphics are referred to as Radeon Vega 8 graphics by AMD. However, these are rather old graphics cores at this point, really not worthy of the Zen 3 CPU cores that are themselves awesome. The next gen of CPUs, referred to as Zen 4, are coming to the new AM5 platform, and they are expected to have RDNA 2 based graphics, and probably cost a lot more to boot. So we shall see what the value equation is there when that launches. The integrated graphics can be overclocked. It runs at 2 GHz out of the box, and many people like to think that RAM speed makes a huge difference since we don't have dedicated GDDR5 or GDDR6 helping with memory bandwidth. More on that in a minute with some memory benchmarks. The 5700G does come with a cooler in the box. However, you'd be well served to buy something better. A $20 Deepcool GameX 400 would be a solid improvement over the cooler in the box. For the record, we used a Scythe Mugen 5 cooler for the testing that we did today, which is a more expensive, but it's a nicer cooler overall. Highly recommended. We have to talk about motherboard support because this is one key area that has changed dramatically since the Zen 3 CPUs launched. At launch, they only officially supported the 500 series motherboards, the A520, the B550, and the X570 chipsets. Since then, AMD has added official support for Zen 3 CPUs at the discretion of motherboard manufacturers, who have to do the actual BIOS updates, to enable support on the entire line of motherboards, 300, 400, and 500 series boards. By this point in the summer of 2022, most motherboards now support these CPUs. However, you'll need to do a BIOS update, and doing so will be different for every board. Some can make a single leap to the latest BIOS, some need to be stair-stepped up to the newest version, 1, 2, or 3 versions at a time. Be aware that you can brick your motherboard with a bad BIOS update, so watch our BIOS upgrade guide if you're not familiar with how to do this. All of the testing that you will see today was done on this ASUS ROG Strix X470-F motherboard. On our test bench right back there, you can see the Cyberpunk 5 sticking up over the box. Why not test on our X570 test bench the MSI X570 Ace motherboard? You can see that test bench right back over there. That's our Zen 3 test bench, and unfortunately this motherboard lacks a video out to use for integrated graphics. Now, I assume that MSI figured that no one was going to install a CPU without a dedicated graphics card on a $400 motherboard. Yes, this was insanely expensive when it launched. And normally, they'd be right. Unless, of course, you're a tech YouTuber and you need to benchmark stuff. Most of the testing today was done with 32 gigabytes of DDR4 3600 CL18. That is our current recommendation for RAM in both size and speed for most people given the market today. Everything was at 1080p resolution with detail settings and render resolutions changing to suit the games tested. What follows now is a lot of benchmarks of live gameplay rather than canned benchmarks, the results for all of which will be in charts later in the video. However, there is great value in seeing the actual gameplay rather than just a number, so you can judge for yourself how well everything runs. Let's move on to a game that surprised me in how poorly it ran, XCOM 2. This game launched in 2016, and it should be fairly easy to run, right? Shockingly, not really. You're watching 1080p at minimum detail, and it's really not very smooth. You could play it, however, it has a lag and a stutter to the gameplay that I really wasn't expecting. Side note, I have over 1,300 hours of playtime in XCOM 2, so I really love this game. The modding scene for the game is awesome, with hundreds and hundreds of amazingly detailed mods for this game. Moving on to another game that ran way worse than expected, Cities Skylines. Now, in fairness, the detail settings here are not at their lowest level, and I am using a large and well-built-out city for testing. However, this is just absolutely terrible. Sure, it's functional, it's a city builder, you can pause and slow down the game, but what is really needed here is a smaller city, lower detail settings, and a dedicated graphics card. So why didn't I reload it at minimum detail? Time is always working against me. I tested 35 games here, trying multiple detail settings turns into a pretty big time sink. Let's move on to something that runs way better, Apex Legends. This isn't a game that I cover very often, but I thought it might run well on this CPU. 1080p, low detail, 100% render, and yeah, this is not bad. It's not ideal for competitive players, but it's absolutely fine for casual gamers. It was smooth, responsive, and had no issues with frame times, lag, or gameplay, other than, of course, my own lack of skill in these sorts of games, since I'm no longer 20 and don't have 57 hours a week to get good. Defense Grid 2 is the tower defense sequel to the critically acclaimed Defense Grid Awakening. If you've never played a tower defense game, start with the first one. It's probably one of the best such games in history. At least, I'd put it at number 1 on my list, and I've played more than a few. The first game launched in 2008. The sequel, Defense Grid 2, which you're watching here, launched in 2014. Not as popular perhaps, but still a lot of fun to play. It plays very well here at 1080p, high detail. Fortnite is one of the most popular online games in the world, and as you can see, runs very nicely here. This is 1080p medium detail. Render was set manually to 100% as it defaults lower at medium. Performance mode was not turned on. However, if you're a competitive player, doing so will double these frame rates at the cost of visual detail. Fortnite is a great example of a game that will run on almost anything at some level, and it shows why you don't have to spend all the money in the world just to have fun while gaming. World of Warships is another great example of a game that you can spend endless hours playing for free, or nearly for free since a premium account goes a long way towards advancement. This is 1080p, high detail, and it runs great. 60 frames per second in most situations, rarely dropping below 50. Smooth and easy to control. If you love World War I and World War II naval combat and you want a game that does a decent job of simulating the ships, if not actual naval combat itself, give World of Warships a try. Star Wars: The Old Republic is one of the last big-budget MMOs to launch way back in 2011. I used to live stream this game on Twitch, and I have an absolutely stupid number of hours of playing it. It may very well be my most played game of all time. Putting all of that aside, you're watching 1080p high detail, which might seem easy to run for a 2011 game. However, it has received several patches and updates over the years, and it isn't the same game that launched 11 years ago. This is both a good and a bad thing, but this isn't a review of Star Wars: The Old Republic, so I'll just say that any reasonably modern machine can run this as well as it runs without complaint. Overwatch was released in 2016 and still has millions of active players every month. This is exactly the sort of CPU that should run this game well, and you won't be disappointed. You're watching 1080p, high detail, 100% render resolution, and it is absolutely solid at 60 frames per second. Totally controllable with no lag or stutter whatsoever. You could play all day long like this and never notice you didn't have a dedicated video card. Soul Survivor is another tower defense game, perhaps not as good as Defense Grid Awakening, but well worth playing for fans of the genre. 1080p, high detail, does not maintain 60 frames per second. However, this is a survival mode that you're watching that gets very intense. The campaign would run better. Either way, no issues here. Star Wars Battlefront 2 launched in 2017, and it has a story worth telling in its own right. But you're not here for that, so I'll just say that the game is in a way better state than it was at launch, and it remains a lot of fun to play today. 1080p, low detail, 100% render, we're getting about 45 frames per second with a 1% low in the 30 range. It's playable, but not ideal. I did play an entire multiplayer match and found the input lag to be low, the control to be good enough. However, this game would really benefit from a dedicated graphics card. The Division 2 launched in 2018, and it is amazingly well optimized. It will use the resources of a high-end machine to provide great performance in multiplayer matches in the Dark Zone, or it'll run in single-player mode on very modest PCs. This is 1080p, low detail, and we are averaging 62 frames per second with a 1% low not far behind. This is completely controllable without any issues. However, keep in mind that this is single-player content here. I would not try this in multiplayer environments on this hardware, so keep that in mind. Pinball FX3 might seem an odd choice to benchmark. It's a pinball game after all. How hard can it be to run? It turns out, not hard at all. But if I don't show it, you may not know that. 1080p, high detail, and we've got well over 100 frames per second. No issues whatsoever here. There are thousands of games just like this that really don't care that you're on integrated graphics, and they play perfectly fine. Minecraft is insanely popular and well worth testing on any low-end hardware for the millions and millions of players out there who don't all have RTX 3090s in their gaming PCs. It's true that shaders and other mods will dramatically affect performance. However, here we have the vanilla game playing at 300 frames per second. The 1% low is just over 100 frames per second. We even have fancy graphics turned on. League of Legends is another game that runs very well on integrated graphics. I am showing this and some of the other games not because I was worried about it, but because I know there are lots of people out there who don't know this, and seeing is believing. 1080p, high detail, and we're over 200 frames per second. What else needs to be said? The Mass Effect franchise is an amazing experience and well worth the playthrough if you like story-based role-playing games. The recently released Legendary Edition upgraded the game's detail and made it easier to run on modern systems while fixing a few old bugs and issues in the game. Here we have Mass Effect 3 at 1080p high detail and it runs awesome. No issues with performance, no input lag in combat, well worth your time to enjoy. Assassin's Creed Syndicate is now 4 games old in the Assassin's Creed franchise, so I honestly expected it to run better than this. You are watching 1080p low detail in a game that launched in 2015, 7 years ago, yet performance is frankly dreadful. Now, I was able to complete a mission and you could play the game this way, however, I wouldn't advise it. We are averaging 30 frames per second here, but what that number doesn't tell you is the input lag. There is a delay between pressing keys and having actions happen. I started to compensate for it after a while, however, it's noticeable when you've played this on better hardware without it. Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla have all released since Syndicate came out. They, of course, don't run any better, but shockingly enough, they don't really run any worse either. At least the built-in benchmarks don't. I didn't test live gameplay on Odyssey and Valhalla, so keep that in mind. This chart shows 3 of the last 4 games tested in the Assassin's Creed series, the latter 2 being the built-in benchmarks as I noted before. None of these belong on integrated graphics. Get a dedicated graphics card if you want to play Assassin's Creed. Cyberpunk 2077 is an interesting game. So much promise, so many broken promises. But that's not important right now. If ever there was a game born for the RTX 3090, this is it. So why test it here? It's this generation's Does It Run Crysis. You're watching 1080p low detail at 50% render resolution. Don't adjust your monitor. Yes, it really looks this bad. I think Sonic Adventure on the Sega Dreamcast would actually be sharper than this. It's really muddy and it looks like someone smeared grease all over the screen. On the plus side, we're getting 45 frames per second average. On the downside, we're getting 25 in the 1% low, and the game looks like it belongs on the original Xbox. So the short version is, don't bother. But wait, you all say, I'm using DDR4 3600 CL18. If I had tighter timings on the RAM, this would run better. Oh, really? You think so? I get this comment a lot. So let's take a look and see just how much difference RAM speed makes. This is 3 different tests in the same area of the game doing the same stuff. On the top, we have DDR4 3200 CL14. This is premium Samsung B-Die memory, G.Skill Flare X to be specific. In the middle, we have a high-end G.Skill Trident Z kit with DDR4 3600 CL16. And on the bottom, we have our standard 3600 CL18 RAM. Note that we actually used 3 different RAM kits here rated for these speeds. This is not one kit with a few timings tweaked. Here's the chart with the results. Oh yeah, RAM really makes a massive difference. I've seen this comment so often I felt it needed to be knocked down because it really needs to be debunked. Yes, technically, in some specific benchmarks, it'll make a small difference that makes a pretty line on a benchmark chart. But in the real world, you're looking at a few percentage points difference at best. Let's try another game, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Again, you've got 3200 CL14 on the top, 3600 CL16 in the middle, and 3600 CL18 on the bottom. Is there a difference? Yes. Is there a noticeable difference when the numbers aren't on the screen? No. Here's the chart. 33, 34, and 31 frames per second. Those are rounding errors. Nothing more, nothing less. Why don't we try another game? Surely we'll see a difference then. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, 1080p lowest detail, and the positions are the same. 3200 CL14 on the top, 3600 CL16 in the middle, and 3600 CL18 on the bottom. Here's the chart of those results. 38, 40, and 38. Oh yeah, that's worth overpaying for fancy RAM. I can hear the chuckleheads in the back already. But Tech, You didn't test 3600 CL14, but you didn't test 3800 CL14 with Infinity Fabric turned to 1-to-1 with custom settings.
Well, you're not wrong.
First, 3600 CL14 will add 1 or 2 frames per second to the 3600 CL16 numbers at the cost of some very expensive RAM. How expensive? At the time of filming, 32 gigabytes of DDR4 3600 CL18 was $85 on Newegg. 32 gigabytes of DDR4 3600 CL14 was $230. That is almost 3 times as expensive, or $145 more, to gain 2 to 4 frames per second in games that were only running at 30 to begin with, or 4 to 8 frames per second that were running just fine at 60 to 100 frames per second. Want to know why that's the dumbest idea in the history of dumb ideas? $150 buys you a used GTX 1070 on eBay, which absolutely demolishes the performance of the Vega 8 graphics and renders the entire RAM speed conversation a pointless issue. Don't spend $145 to get 5% more performance. Spend $150 to get 500% more performance. That concludes the live gameplay testing part of this video, but hold on, we do have more tests done using other games' built-in benchmarks. We won't show you the footage, or this would be longer than Lord of the Rings, the special edition. This chart of 15 games tested shows the games we tested on low detail. The averages are first. I'll show you the 1% lows in just a minute. A few games run really well. We've already covered Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, but others such as Rainbow Six Siege, Anno 1800, and World War Z will run just fine here. Others, such as Watch Dogs Legion, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Dirt 5 will not. Those games need a dedicated graphics card. Here are the 1% low numbers on the same 15 games. Half of these are really playable, some are just okay, and some are terrible. Moving on to the 12 games that we tested at high detail, most of these we showed you already, but now you can see the final numbers in chart form. I'll use this moment to remind you all that if you want to see image versions of these charts early, please consider supporting us on Patreon for either $2 per month or $20 a year. These are the 1% low numbers of the 12 games tested at high detail. Some hold up pretty well, others fall down pretty hard. In fairness, Star Wars: The Old Republic isn't this CPU's fault. An RTX 3090 will do this at times. It's just that game. Mass Effect dipped mostly from scene transitions and so on. 3 games were tested at medium detail. You can see them on their own chart here. XCOM 2 really did disappoint, a shame because it's such a fun game. The other 2 ran without complaint. If you take nothing else away from this video, take this one point. Whatever your hardware is, be it this 5700G, an i5-10400 with an RX 580, or an i5-2400 and a GT 1030, game selection is everything when it comes to your overall experience. Run games your hardware is designed to run, and avoid games that it is not. Cyberpunk 2077 may have been a disappointment overall, however, it was good enough to get 2 full playthroughs from me with over 300 hours played. If ever there was a game that deserves a 34-inch, 1440p, ultra-wide monitor, and an RTX 3090, it's Cyberpunk. On the other end of the spectrum, older games like Call of Duty Infinite Warfare are both cheap to buy and very easy to play on the Ryzen 7 5700G. Or something like an i5-3450 and an R9 370 if you're rocking older hardware. The true benefit to the 5700G is not the integrated graphics for modern games now. It's the 8 Zen 3 cores for when you want to drop $150 on a GTX 1070 or $400 on an RX 6700 XT and finally play Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Regarding CPU upgrades, this really only makes sense for anyone currently running a Ryzen 3 2200G or perhaps a Ryzen 5 3400G and otherwise doesn't have a graphics card. You move from Zen 1 or Zen Plus to Zen 3, you double your core count and you double or quadruple your thread count, and for a reasonable price, all things considered. If you are currently running a Ryzen 5 1600 or a Ryzen 5 2600 and you want an upgrade to Zen 3, and you already have a dedicated graphics card, skip the 5700G and either get the Ryzen 7 5700X or the Ryzen 9 5900X. Either would be a solid upgrade to any 1000 or 2000 based Ryzen system. Would I build a new system today based on the 5700G? In a word, no. Two reasons. Number one, Zen 4 is going to launch in about 8 weeks. It'll be faster CPU cores, it'll have faster integrated graphics, and it will, for the most part, render this moot. If Zen 4 ends up being hard to find or really expensive, then for a vastly superior gaming experience, I would spend $250, I would buy a Ryzen 7 5700X, and I would buy a used GTX 1070 for $150. It is 500% faster than the integrated graphics here, and for a relatively small amount of money, it is a huge improvement to the overall gaming experience. Note that I didn't cover non-gaming results here. Some people don't need a graphics card because they just want the powerful Zen 3 cores and are fine with integrated graphics. It's kind of why Intel's put integrated graphics in all their chips for so many years. I'll just say this, the Vega 8 graphics is perfectly fine for anything you typically do in Windows or Linux outside of serious content creation.
URCity Keys is the best source for genuine Windows and Office Professional product keys that work the first time, every time. Get 25% off their already amazing prices using our code TD20 and the link in the video description below. $15 gets you a Windows Professional OEM key that is a real product key and activates directly with Microsoft. Or get a full copy of Office 2019 Professional Plus for $50 that redeems at setup.office.com using your Microsoft account. Or why not both? And the nice thing, use them forever as they link directly to your Microsoft account and work through reinstalls. We have been using URCity Keys for over 3 years now and highly recommend them.
Thank you all so much for watching to the very end of this video. 2 gold stars for all of you still here. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you love it. Remember to subscribe to the channel with the big huge red button directly below. Hit the join button for a bunch of benefits and to directly support the channel. Check the links down in the video description. Affiliate links to Amazon, Newegg, and eBay are down there. They cost you nothing to click on, but if you click on them before you buy something, whether it's this CPU, whether it's something else, it actually doesn't matter so long as you click on the link before you check out. You directly support the channel at no extra cost to you, and it's a great way to proactively and positively support channels you like. And if you're still watching this video at the very end, you must like us, I hope, unless you just like watching videos you don't like. That's not important. What is important is you will also find a link down there to Patreon, which I mentioned before. $2 a month or $20 a year gets you early access to the filming scripts and benchmark charts in all of our videos, including the ones that you saw here. And you will also find links down there to our various social media. Thank you all so very much for watching. I will see all of you next time. Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Computer gaming has a booyah when you get first try, but when you get it, you get it. I showed you Battlefield 5 at the beginning, at the start of the video, and to be fair, Infinite Warfare came out in 2016, so that helps a lot when it comes to performance. Battlefield 5 came out in 2018, which is why the reasons is this, it's the new games are harder to run, film at 11. From Intel in the form of the i7-980 and AMD in the form of the Phenom X216. That's not what the words say on the screen. It contains 8 Zen 3 cores that are hyper-threaded, giving us a total of 16 threads to work with. It's the Works burger. The 5700G does come with a cooler in the box. However, you'd be well served to buy something better. A $20 Deep Cool. We have to talk about motherboard support because this is one key area that has changed dramatically since this CPU launched. At launch, the Zen 3 chips only officially supported 500 series motherboards, the A520, the B550, and the X570 chipsets. Since then, AMD has added official support for Zen 3 to the entire line of chipsets that they've released, going all the way back to the X370 Still ad-libbing and still getting it wrong. Part 38, take 5. All of our testing today was done on this ASUS ROG Strix X470-F motherboard on that test bench right back there. Why not test on our X570 text bench? What follows now is a lot of benchmarks of live gameplay rather than canned benchmarks. The results for all of which will be charts will be in charts. There will be charts. Let there be charts. 3600 CL14 will add 1 or 2 frames per second to the CL16. Damn it. Good Lord. Who wrote the script? The script is so long. If anybody is still watching, a bonus gold star to you, because that's ridiculous. Who wrote a 100 and something odd part script? 7 pages over 5,000 words.